They want us to think that we're an insignificant speck of dust, but let me tell you, we are so much more than dust in the wind.
At least 4 billion useless eaters will be eliminated by the year 2050.
I'm still waiting for somebody to show me gas pressure without a container.
I personally don't believe anything they say, right down to the God they claim they worship.
None of the math adds up.
You could stack up all their math books, all their science books, and even put all their degrees stacked up on top of that, and you still wouldn't be high enough to see the curvature.
This is exactly why grounding is so important.
We see too far.
We're just regular people who know we're being lied to. We're tired of it.
The bottom line is, there's only one choice left, and that's to dismantle this whole thing from the top down.
Typically, we kind of just shoot from the hip and just have a chill session, but I did actually come prepared this time with a few questions.
Nice.
Whoa, light me up whenever you're ready.
Yeah, dude. We'll just get the convo going. Ted, start us off, man.
Tell everybody where to find you and what basically you do. I mean, not everything, but just in a nutshell.
You can find me primarily on YouTube under the name Lucius Aurelian. That's the channel name, and it also goes by Restitutor Orbis, and I have a reason for doing that. It means restorer of the world, although Orbis actually means circle. It doesn't mean sphere, as a lot of people suggest, which is another one of those funny comments I've gotten.
Yeah.
And primarily, I consider myself an alternative researcher. I look at different theories for how things came to be. Another look at history, if you will. And I spend a lot of my time analyzing just about every aspect of things from architecture to fiction to science fiction and looking to sort out the actual truth of our existence. And that's the primary purpose behind my channel.
Sounds amazing.
Summed it up for me.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Why does it mean circle instead of sphere?
Well, that's how it translates from the Latin, although, I haven't done an exploration on languages yet. Languages are quite interesting, including dialects and pronunciations and all that other good stuff. And,
right.
The Tower of Babel story, it's quite true. It was all made to divide us, and it functions quite well to do that. So.
Yeah, it does indeed.
Still to this day, man. Crazy how that works.
Yeah, I just have fun toying around with it, so that's kind of my way of doing it.
Well, dude, you know what? I through all your videos, the one thing that I found that was really cool, and I think it'd be a good place to start off. Can you tell us about the 5 eras theory and just kind of the origin of that, or is that your theory or something that you caught on to?
So it is a theory that I caught on to, and I modified a little bit based on my own observations. So I had followed in the footsteps of a couple other alternative researchers, and prior to that, I was, a professor of history at a significant university, although now I know that doesn't really mean anything. And I walked away from that job several years ago. I grew tired of dealing with the administration. I grew tired of the politics behind it. And most of all, I grew tired of the fact that everyone just followed a certain way things were going, and it wasn't a true pursuit of knowledge, if you will. It was, this is the way things are going to be, and your findings should support that. And if you want your career to advance, or if you want financial benefits, of course I won't say that, but they'll allude to it, then you'd better come to the conclusions we want you to come to.
Yeah, just go along with the narrative.
Pretty much. I mean, the 5 eras just comes from what other legitimate historians, archaeologists have observed with society, civilization, cities being built one on top of the other. And that's something everybody can see everywhere. And it's a lot more prevalent than we like to believe. It's everywhere. It's not just in Troy in the Aegean Sea. It's everywhere. It's Los Angeles. It's Des Moines, Iowa. It's New York City. All the different cities all across the land, and not just the United States, but everywhere. It's just in places we don't think it is. So that was the origin behind the 5 eras theory. And it's really a way just to look at things, but it's very fluid because we have no idea how long each era was. We don't know if it's accurate. And as I always say, it could be 10 eras or it could just be one era that's overlooked by somebody else, and they just decide to alter things whenever they feel up to it. It's just
Right.
a way to try to look at things.
Yeah, I was gonna say how did they come up with just 5? Is it something to do with like the different architecture styles, or what landed on that?
It's actually based on the architecture styles. It's also based on looking at myth and legend, which I actually attribute a lot more primacy to, because I believe myth and legend is a lot more accurate than we're led to believe.
I do too.
And you'll find multiple cultures,
Yeah.
multiple civilizations say that there have been 5 eras of humanity, 5 recorded eras. And so it's also based on that, an extrapolation based on those readings, and that's compared with what you can actually see in the field or on site, as I say on the channel.
When you say eras, are you saying like come to completion, like demolished, destroyed, then rebuilt, or is it more or less like a pop up? You know what I mean? A sudden rise or a revolution or something like that in society, and then it dies down again and almost diminishes, and then comes back. What depicts the eras? The differences?
So a difference between an era ends in terms of how I look at it in the theory with a hard reset where everything is completely wiped out. All knowledge of the civilization, the society, it's all completely wiped out. In other words, somebody from the second era has no conscious awareness of the first era, and so on and so forth.
Gotcha.
And so you've got no written record. You have no way to know what your true origin is. The only thing you have is whatever you're told in the era that you're in. And then the rest of it, myth and legend. And that's all you've got.
Yeah, so basically like some sort of reset that's triggered and it just kind of wipes out everything. And
Who's doing these?
Well, that's a good question. And I've looked into that and developed a couple theories. I mean, is it an external force? Is it something that we came into contact with in previous eras? That's the primary working theory that I have now. And it's some sort of adversary that has a way of infiltrating us right down to the personal level. I mean, we like to think we're always focused on secret society, secret organizations, although, when everybody knows about them, exactly how are they secret? I don't know.
Right.
It's almost like we're supposed to know about them and focus on them. Hey, look what the secret organization is doing now. Let's all talk about it. Did you see that?
Yeah, it's like everybody look over here, and then nobody's looking the other way of what's going on.
That's their only way they can keep secret now, is just distract us.
You want to know what's funny is
And
I could be wrong, but I think this is going to be episode 33, so you're going to get some crap.
Oh man!
Well, look on the bright side. At least we're not doing this in 2023 or 2013, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Actually, that one led to another question. What year really even is it?
You want an honest answer? I have no idea. I did a video on it. It's called the date paradox. I mean, we have no idea what year it is. I mean, we can really say whatever year it is that we want to. You can actually go and it was the Star Wars novels, the Admiral Thrawn trilogy, the good one from the 90s, where they talked about it. They made fun of it in those novels that they had no idea what year it was. Whenever there's a new power, even they change the dating system. And so how can you have any idea what year it is? I mean, I can't tell you what happened 2,000 years ago. Sure, I can read written accounts, but was I there?
Right.
No.
So
was anybody alive now there?
What
No.
do you think about the thing with instead of 19 that used to be an I or a J because the J didn't exist in the old alphabet, or is it the I? I forget which way it is. But do you subscribe to that, or do you think that's nonsense?
Well, I mean, somebody was marking something when they put it on there, but I mean, when I haven't done an exploration on tombstones yet, but I've started to look at cemeteries a little bit, because one thing you'll find when you go to the old cemeteries is if you find the old entry baseline pillars, they've got some really magnificent concrete on those things. I mean, you could take a sledgehammer to it and not even chip it. I mean, that's how strong that old concrete is. That's my initial interest, but anybody can put dates on tombstones from any time.
Yeah,
they can. I mean, but there's a reason why we see it and why we have the ceremony of the funeral. Now, granted, it varies society to society, but pretty much everybody respects the concept of tombstones and memorials, and you'll see that all across the land. But then we take it for granted that, yes, that's the way it always was. Therefore, it must be real. The date must be accurate. You ever notice that on Roman coinage, there's never a year?
I've
No, I
never
didn't know.
noticed.
I didn't
Now I
even-
will.
Yeah.
I will now.
Just take a look at the Roman coinage and let me know if you see a year of any sort. Now, of course, it'll be said, well, they didn't believe in Jesus, so therefore they didn't have the year. The years are all associated with Jesus. At least that's what we're told.
Yeah.
You know, Lord and Savior, and therefore the dating system's based on that. The J means Jesus. Well, does it? How do you know for sure?
I know.
I mean, especially when you consider the difference in languages, the difference in numerical systems. I mean, it may, but again, it's another big leap of faith of taking all these things for granted because so much of this stuff we're told by other people who were told by other people who were told. And if you just play a simple whisper game, go back to that episode of The Simpsons,
Yes.
Skinner's going to pay for that purple monkey dishwasher comment.
Okay, hold on. So last week we recorded an episode and we were having all kinds of technical difficulties. And at the very end of the episode, I said, anybody who's still listening, text me or message Purple Monkey Dishwasher. I swear to God, you'll hear it on
No
it.
way.
You
did.
You just tripped me out because I was like, that episode hadn't released yet.
Is that the episode
I'm
you listened
freaking-
to then, or?
Yeah, it's on an
No,
old
that
episode of The
wasn't the episode.
Simpsons.
That wasn't the episode I listened to. I looked at one of your earlier episodes. That was a little bit before that.
No, that one's not even
Okay.
out yet.
That's pretty
That
wild.
episode's not
That
even
one's
out.
not
Oh,
out
that's
yet.
true. Yeah, it's not even out.
There's no
I
way
tripped
you
out
saw
for
it.
a second.
Episode 33, Purple Monkey Dishwashers.
There you go.
What's going on here, man?
But it's just an example, though, how let's just say the five of us passed a message between us. You know, does the message arrive completely authentic, or can it be altered in just 10 to 15 minutes?
Yeah.
And then start increasing the amount of time, increase the change in civilizations and governments, because ultimately everybody's going to conform to authority. That's just what people do. You understand that. And also add in language barriers, add in changes in dialect. And then we're supposed to believe that, yes, we have a perfectly accurate picture of what happened 2,000 years ago. Give me a break.
Yeah, I know. I agree. Nobody really knows.
And nobody knows where the original ones are, even though people say they have the original, Sanscripts or tablets of this culture and all that. But again, it's just like a trust me bro kind of thing going on there, right? Because you're not going to get it, at least not in my lifetime. I'm not going to get a pair of gloves handed to me and go in there and take a look at this stuff. And even then, how do you know if that's even it, right? Like,
well, it's funny you mentioned that, because it was one of the first events that happened with me when I was a new professor, when we were actually going to look at some legitimate bona fide artifacts. And these were actually vases from the Ming Dynasty, or so we were told. And I couldn't help but think of that scene from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade where Henry conks Indy over the head with it. And he says, it's merely a counterfeit. It's a fake. It's not the real one.
Right.
And so I'm thinking this. And then at the end, I just, they gave us this full presentation, and it was a great presentation. They had all the theatrics of it, 2.5 hours, and it was interesting. And back then, this was the late 1990s. And at the end, I asked the department chair and the actual curator, so how is it you can actually display these vases? And the guy says to me, well, these aren't the real thing. You don't think we could actually display the real thing in front of you and something could happen. And then it came to me, and so I asked, so where exactly is the real thing? You know what he told me? I don't know.
Oh,
There it is. There it is.
The museum.
That's exactly how I pictured it being.
yeah.
Why is this building here?
I know.
What is going on?
Right.
I mean,
Exactly.
I could justify it to myself. I could say, all right, it's tight security. These are very valuable artifacts that could be worth so much money, or they're cultural treasures. And yet you always get the story. This is not an isolated incident. So yeah, if you want to hand wave this away and just say, oh yeah, they're just protecting it. Sure. But I don't buy it, because it's the
Over
same
there
thing
with
every time.
it's actually over there with the real dinosaur bones.
Damn it, Rufus. I was just going to bring that up, and you cut me off. I was going to say, I have to ask you then, what do you think about dinosaurs?
I think you know what I think about dinosaurs. If I told you what I thought
I
about
want other
vases
people
from
to
just
know.
400 years ago. Oh gosh. I mean,
Yeah.
if you go further back, and that's how they work it, they add time and they add distance to everything, and that's just supposed to hand wave everything away. Uniformitarianism. It takes a long time for things to change, except of course for our technological development. That happened very recently.
Yeah,
But it's well
rapidly.
documented, Exactly. You know, we went from the Renaissance, then we went from the Industrial Revolution, Second Industrial Revolution, Technological Revolution of the 20th century, and boom, here we are. And now we can't put any boots on the moon anymore, even though we could do it in the 1970s. So don't ask me to explain that either.
Bullshit.
Oh my gosh.
So what you're saying is dinosaurs are fake and gay. I just want to make sure that's what we're getting at. Ghey, of course. Of course.
That's not to say that they didn't find something out there that they might not want everybody else to see.
Like
but
dragons?
at the end of the day, you got to be careful though. It's possible, and they're alluded to, but does anybody have direct access to the evidence? Because if there is something like that out there, do you really think anybody's actually going to be allowed to see it?
No, absolutely.
Right.
And if they are, there's going to be a cover story. The bones are going to be taken away for safekeeping, and no one's ever going to see them again. Or you'll see them again, and they'll be the display bones, if you follow me.
I do find it odd that they started to say that dinosaurs had feathers and like trying to like change them up, and also the whole thing with the Chinese zodiac that all the animals are real except for dragons. Those are fake. So why are we to believe that they just decided to pick one mythical creature and all the rest real animals? So I'm not saying they do. I'm not saying they don't. But to me, they have more credence than dinosaurs, me personally.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, because they're referenced in multiple cultures. And I mean, that's why you have to look at the physical aspect of it. You have to look at the myth, the legend, and what's really written down. And don't allow some people just to tell you, well, you have to dismiss that because we don't have evidence of that. Now stand by. Our next probe is going to the moon next year, so make sure you tune in.
Yes.
Dude, I'm just
That's how it
waiting for
goes.
those. I'm just waiting for those space hotels to come out. To be honest, they said that we're actually going to be one of the first people they're going to send up there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Flat
Oh,
Earthers
I
just
can't
show
wait.
us. Just to send us up.
They're gonna prove us wrong.
Death, I see you're sharing something down there. Is it still topical? You want me to bring it up?
I shared the Roman coinage.
Oh, yeah.
Just some of it. And I'm not seeing any numbers.
No dates.
No dates. To go back to what you said earlier.
Gee, why would that be? The people who were so organized as the Romans, who could build wonderful structures and roads that we're told endure to this day, didn't put dates on their coinage. Well, I guess it wasn't important.
Interesting.
There's a
Do you have a theory on
Yeah.
why?
If you want to know the truth, probably because it's not legitimate coinage.
There we
go.
go.
There it is.
Okay.
Don't you find it interesting? Let's just say the history is as we're told it was. And you have this great civilization that makes all this fine metal money. It's denarii that's made out of silver, gold, and then they change the component. So what? Then you have these dark ages with these warlords that are all around and about. Hey, we found this old coinage mint factory in Rome. Oh, okay. Well, grab all that stuff and melt it down. We need gold. I need to buy more land. I need to achieve more. Yeah, I mean, really? Are we supposed to believe that all this coinage survived to this day? Come on.
So you're basically saying that the Romans, they ditched the gold standard too. Did they go?
Well,
history repeats itself like that.
I take it a
Right.
step further and I just say, what Romans? But, that's just between us.
Wow.
We need to go down this.
So this
we
is
need to go
totally-
down this.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Death.
Now you got me hooked now. So
I need to hear all of this.
Mhm.
I thought the Romans were real, bro. I'm over here a Marcus Aurelius fanboy. Like, I love his book and everything. And I find out very like right before this podcast that probably bullshit,
Well, let's take two different looks at the Romans. Let's go from the historical look, assume everything we're told about them is exactly accurate. So we're supposed to believe that this little nascent city-state in the middle of Italy managed to rise to power to where they had an empire that controlled the entire Mediterranean. Not only that, but they managed to have engineering achievements that cannot even be surpassed or equaled today. For example, Roman concrete. Oh, and by the way, they build roads that are still there. You can still ride your bicycle on those roads and not feel a bump. unlike any county road that you might ride your bike on these days.
Oh my God, dude. I live in
That's
South
crazy.
Florida.
and,
It's
and
horrible.
I'm not even talking about city roads, highways, or interstates. That's a whole nother animal. And of course, it used to depend what state you're in, but now they all seem to be sucking equally, if you know what I mean. So,
Right.
so if all that's true, and these toga-wearing people that managed to export their society, and then they were just so great, but then they were corrupted from the inside, I started to think, well, maybe that's not just a geographically limited civilization. Perhaps that's referencing bits and pieces from a civilization, another civilization that was across the entire land. And that's my theory for what Rome is a reference to. And here's what this is based on. You can go back to one of my very early videos when you look at Trajan's column and the church, the structure that's behind it, the dome building that's behind it. Compare and contrast that with the Soldier and Sailors Monument and the Iowa State Capitol in those images. There's 1,500 years between those structures, or almost 1,000 years altogether.
Yep.
And yet they look exactly the same. It's crazy.
Wow. Wow.
There's some
gotta-
silly crap going on. So the whole, so you're saying that the whole story we're fed about Rome is a lie, basically. So maybe that's what they mean when they say all roads lead to Rome. That's the
Well,
original lie,
yeah.
dude.
Well, and here's what starts it all. And this is where you get this concept that the theory that there was a civilization across the land. You see this architecture type everywhere you look.
Yeah.
It's not just in Italy. It's not just in the Mediterranean. It's in the United States. It's in North America, South America, Asia even has it. You can find examples in Shanghai. You can find examples in Japan, the palace there. It's crazy.
Wow.
I can say
You
that's
can
one
find,
of the
you can find a wonderful. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
that's one of the things that before, like, I'm talking about teenage years, maybe even middle school when they were teaching us about this, that I specifically remember always sat wrong with me, because they're teaching us about this culture that existed at this time, and then this culture that existed on this time, and this one that existed at this time, but you're looking at the stuff from them and they're so similar. It's like, why are these people depicting the same things that these people are, that were supposedly thousands of years apart, opposite sides of the world, have never met each other, but they're carving the same things in stone, and we're supposed to buy that? So I think that's around when my brain shut off in school and was like, I'm not paying attention to you anymore. This doesn't make sense.
I don't need this for some reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's how it's all conducted. It's all about selling a completely different story for a different geographical area. And then when you have different cultures, different languages, nobody can really compare and contrast. But there are several of these structures that have survived that you can compare and look at to this day, and you can see the similarities. You can't deny it. I mean, you can try to.
Yeah.
You can try walking through these
Right.
wonderful structures and just think, oh, yeah, a bunch of fools in Iowa who are farmers managed to build this glorious state capitol after fighting the Civil War because they had government funding that came back from the federal government to equip their army. I mean, that's the official story they tell us. And I guess they were just bored afterwards, so they built this beautiful state capitol. Nobody could build something like this
Yeah,
today.
that's always how it is. It's like they didn't have cell phones back then, so they were just so bored.
Yeah, exactly.
And they-
You know, I mean, you didn't have a lower life expectancy. You didn't have raids from Native Americans, and you didn't have country justice, as they used to call it, to worry about. So just build a big, huge, beautiful palace of a building that'll be standing to this day. And oh gosh, that's
like-
just one example.
Like
That's one
Utah.
example.
Utah freaks me out, man. The story about how those giant buildings were built in Utah is total nonsense. I've been there. I've seen them myself. They're absolutely amazing. And they're like, yeah, we built it in 2 years. What? It's a big deal. Then we covered it up with some dirt because we were hiding it because we didn't want them to know we built it. But then we excavated it and made it grand. Like, it's so absurd, the stories they tell us.
Oh yeah. Well, and then all the backpedaling that you get on it. Well, it wasn't just 148 settlers. There were actually thousands that came right away. And don't think about logistics, because just hand wave that away. There's no logistical considerations. Anything can be done. People just worked harder. They were more determined back then.
Dude, I grew
Yeah,
up
don't think
thinking
about
there were
anything.
cowboys and
We just figured it
Indians
out for you.
in the early 1900s or whatever they tell us. Like, no, man, no, it's not true. It's so ridiculous. And I should have known because it was the biggest thing in Hollywood, just like they started making space stuff the biggest thing in Hollywood. Whenever they got to push it, and that's why it's freaking me out now that they're pushing all this superhero crap. I was like, all right, so are Nephilim going to come back with special powers and they want us to normalize this? What the hell's going on, man? Whenever they go into something, they're getting ready to do something, I don't trust them. That's just me.
They seem to have switched now to just trying to go after our internal selves, and I think that's what it's a reflection of. So,
Fair enough.
I'm not concerned with a bunch of clowns with superpowers showing up, but you never know. I mean, that if you talk about Nephilim, you better say they're clowns too, because that's what they were. They were clowns.
Oh, yes, you know that. I love Paul.
I'm well aware of it. I tried to do a video on the Nephilim, and it got shut down because I didn't fully embrace, or I didn't say it enough. That's the accepted theory. And there are a lot of accepted theories in this quote unquote alternative research that you have to say or agree with something. I don't know. I mean, the Nephilim could have been clowns, but I think there's a much more complicated story with their origin.
I do too, but I also think I think that clowns now, or some of the clowns, may be representative of them. I don't think they were necessarily clowns, but a lot of the big things that would be linked to stuff like that, they have clowns. Like it's a little weird. It's a little creepy, but I don't think Nephilim were clowns. I think there's an odd connection there. That's all.
It's interesting to me. It's one of those things that just suddenly came up and suddenly got pushed in a certain way. And there's nothing wrong with that, but when all other theories, all other considerations are instantly dismissed, that's where my ears come up and I'm realizing, there's a reason for that. Why?
Yeah.
Dude,
I don't know anything. I don't know anything. So
oh no,
I just
nothing anymore.
Like
man.
I hear stuff that resonates with me, but I heard stuff that resonated with me 5 years ago that I know is bullcrap now. So we're all forever evolving, trying to figure out what's going on. And anybody who says this is it is lying to you. They don't know. Nobody knows.
Yes.
Well, we're obviously in the middle of a we're obviously in the middle of a reset anyway. So we're just slowly destroying everything we thought we knew, or are we just trying to figure out what was actually real and what wasn't, right? But in the process, we're just erasing and destroying everything. So, I don't think there's any way to stop this. And I'm on board, man. Just like you said, I don't know anything. So if everything stops and starts over right here, I guess that's what it is, right? Or we're going to find out the real truth somehow, some way.
Well, I think that the disturbing thing that I've noticed within my lifetime, and this is just my observation, take it or leave it, but it seems as though many more people are just willing to go along with whatever the heck they're told to believe and think in the moment, even if it's 180 degrees different than what they were told the previous day. And there seems to be many more people that are just willing to do that, and they have no problem doing it. Oh yeah, of course. I mean, that's the way things always were. Wait a minute, we weren't always fighting Eurasia. Oh yeah, well, we're fighting East Asia now. Get them the weapons and supplies. But we were fighting Eurasia yesterday. It's East Asia today. Don't question it.
1984.
But I mean, you know what I'm talking about. You've seen
Yep.
Oh, absolutely.
People just don't question anything. Oh, just go along with it. And then they'll attack people that do question things because it's a threat to them. Why?
Yeah. And we'll literally have.
I think it's a threat. I think it's a threat because, if it comes out that these things are lies, then that just kind of like breaks down their whole reality and the way that they're comfortable in the way that the system is now. And if these things come to fruition, then they understand that their lives are going to change immensely, and they don't want that. So they're just like, I'll just go along with whatever, the narrative is, the next new thing, in hopes that they can just still keep their cush little lives and be comfortable.
No, very true. I can't wait to get my container house for $600,000.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yes.
Oh man.
Oh yeah, they're really hyping those up on Amazon these days, right? It's like a shipping container that folds out.
Have
Like,
you
look how
ever dreamt
comfortable
of
and
being
fancy
a
this is.
sardine? You can be one now.
I mean, it's comfortable, it's going to support all the initiatives, and it's what everybody's doing, so you should do it too.
It's also
cool.
trans friendly, so
Yes, that's right. And
it has unisex bathrooms built in.
Oh man.
Derailed. All right.
Yeah, I mean, it's all those lines of effort that they're all pushing at the same time, and I mean,
Exactly.
and nobody just seems to blink at it. You know, they'll just say, "Oh, it's just the way things are." Hyperinflation, that's just the way things are. Don't worry about it.
Well,
Okay.
one thing you have to give it to the resolve of the people, because at this point, I'm amazed that we're still functioning as a society, as everyone just continues to get poorer and poorer, and the standard of living goes down further and further. And I guess they just got to throw as many distractions at us as possible, and like I said, our cell phones, and that keeps people happy enough. But I don't know how there's not everyone's homeless on the street.
Well, that's funny you bring up
Scary.
like hyperinflation right there. That's one of the excuses they use for all the magnificent buildings back in the day, is that they had a more sound money, so they were able to pay people for longer periods of time to build massive structures like that, And
Yeah, it's pretty laughable. Well, we just need more money. Well, wait a minute. We've got more money now than we ever have in the history of the entire world. So how could we not have enough money to do it? I mean, it's absurd when you really pull it apart.
right.
Because we can just create money. We admit we can do that. That's how things function.
Yeah.
Governments can print money. So how could there possibly be a monetary limitation? I mean, you're going off, you're believing in the idea of money, but that's what's sold to people, the objective reality of it. And the reality is it's an idea. It's not an objective reality. It's for us to believe in it. It's for us to use it. But I guarantee you the people who truly hold the strings of power, they do not care about money, because they certainly don't act like they care about money ever.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, dude, I bet you the Romans had like a really high tax system. I mean, just look at the roads. They got the best roads.
Well, they go back and they answer that question by saying they had forced labor. It was the forced labor that did all this,
Right.
They were the same ones who built the pyramids. When you have forced labor, you can do anything, even if it's logistically and physically impossible. Just crack the whip harder. It'll make it happen.
And then in the next sentence, they'll tell you a happy worker is a productive worker. but slaves built everything. That's ridiculous, man. It's absurd.
Yeah, I think it was 6 or 7 months ago. I was doing a live stream and we were talking about Spartacus. And I said, you know what the worst part about the movie Spartacus was? And Spartacus was a great movie. But the part that made no sense is, wait a minute, we're supposed to believe that Spartacus just stood there for years and years and years and took it. And then one day he was just pushed too far and decided to grab the guy's leg and bite it. And that began the movie.
That's it. I'm done right now. Rufus, you said you have a list.
I guess,
Go ahead. No, go
Well,
ahead.
it's funny you talked about the movie there. I'm one thing out of everything. I'm just astonished with your knowledge of pop culture, and especially from the past. And I was watching that video about the 80s time nexus.
That was a fun one to do.
Dude, that was an awesome video, and I enjoyed it a lot. And even how it got into like the portal on the ceiling in that palace in India, and then the CERN, comparing it to the CERN. Actually, I kind of look like I'm in the CERN collider right now.
Tube,
almost,
bro.
it's kind of like a similar structure. But what's a time nexus, anyways, for our listeners? And what prompted you to make that video from the 80s?
Well, the time nexus is a theory that there are overlapping timelines or overlapping realities that can coexist. And a nexus is a place where you can cross
The most
one reality
obvious.
to another. And so, I mean, and like I said in that live stream, it was a bad plot device from Star Trek Generations. It was a very bad plot device from that movie. But they had several episodes where they looked at it, and there were other science fiction series that really covered the idea where you have an intersection point. So think of it as it's an intersection between four roads, four different timelines where you can cross from one to the other. So it's an attempt to try to explain why we have all these divergent observations that we do, because you can't just explain it through a hardcore singular physical reality. I mean, I'd like to, but I can't.
Right.
It doesn't make sense.
Right.
Art Deco is a great example. Or is the timeline even more messed up than what we believe? Art Deco is a building style that we had from the 1920s ostensibly until 1940. Some places it went a little further, and it just completely went away. But if you go inside those Art Deco buildings, you are not looking at anything that's from the rest of the 20th century, the 21st century. Nobody can build like that today, not with any material. I mean, it's science fiction stuff, quite frankly, when you go into an Art Deco building, a legitimate Art Deco building. And the very best one, nobody can go into. It's off limits. Nobody can access it anymore.
I don't
What's
get
that?
it.
That's the Plummer Building in Rochester, Minnesota, on the Mayo Clinic. Now, you can look at pictures of the interior of the Plummer Building, and you'll see it's one of the most unbelievable Art Deco buildings on the interior, because that's really where the story of those buildings are. I mean, they're gorgeous on the outside, but it's on the inside. How in the hell did they do that on the inside? When you go in there, everything is legitimate hard stone. And I've had people who've come up and try to tell me, convince me, oh, no, that's not the case. You know, that the Iowa State Capitol, they keep trying to convince me, well, there's bricks in it. There's bricks in it. And I just want to say, have you ever actually walked on the inside of it? There are no damn bricks inside the Iowa State Capitol. There are no bricks. And no matter how much they try to sell us that, and they even try to tell us that, oh, in 1900, only 20 years after it was built, the thing was falling apart. And they've constantly had to do renovations on it. But yet, if you actually go inside, you know that's a bold-faced lie. I mean, that is all hard, solid stone. You go in there and you knock anything, any pillar, any column, any retaining wall in that state capitol, it is solid as can be. And it's going to be there for another 10,000 years. Nothing's going to pull that thing down. Damn. I swear to you.
Wow,
man. You get that feeling when you go in there. And it's the same thing with those Art Deco buildings. There is no corners cut. There is nothing cheap. There's no facading. And so don't tell me, oh, they had more money. During the Great Depression, they had more money when they had to take everybody's gold. Give me a break.
It's insane. It's insane to think that. To believe their story.
That it seems as though, like, throughout the eras, there's always some architecture that's left over from every era. And I can't imagine that anything would be left over from this shitty era in our architecture that's going on now. I mean, you know, you got an aluminum plane allegedly just bringing down buildings left and right. Some it didn't even hit. You know, and if it does, like, they're gonna be laughing at our architecture whenever the next era comes along.
You bring up a good point, and that's why there could be more eras than we're aware of. You know, maybe we've had this plastic transient era that's repeated 3 or 4 times already, and we're still just back to those buildings. And on that note, did you know that a plane slammed into the Empire State Building?
Mm-hmm.
I did.
A lot of people.
Yeah, that's right. It
was a bomber.
Oh, and they rebuilt it afterwards, or after it came down?
Well, they closed the floor for one day and cleaned up, and then it was open the next day.
Wow.
The janitor came in, swept up real quick.
Yeah.
What about all the jet fuel? What happened?
He hit it with a hose.
It was a propeller-driven plane. They didn't have that nasty jet fuel, you know, that just melts everything. So, you know, I mean, they'll try to explain it, but you had a plane that crashed into it, and they brushed it off. Just like in a random courthouse in Iowa built in the 1870s, it takes a direct hit from an F4 tornado, and the only thing that goes is the cupola that they built in the 1970s, the very top of it, made of wood. The rest of it, no problem.
The dunce is built.
Right off.
That part. Bill, what do you have down there? Is it topical to this moment? What you're sharing?
Well, it was inside the Iowa State Capitol building.
okay.
I thought
There we
this
go.
was fantastic.
Whoa.
That's the library.
Oh, is that the library?
Yep, that's the library.
Dude, look at that.
Still, fuck. I mean, hell, man. That's crazy.
It looks like there's got to be at least a couple secret passages in there, though. Am I right?
You just got to pull the right book.
Pull on that book. Yeah.
When you actually go in there, they have the temerity to tell you that every work in there, every novel is all legal. It's all law.
Really?
They actually tell you that. Yep. It's all legal work, all state legal.
What does that say about our legal system if that were to be true? Come on, man.
Dude, the whole
like this is just
up.
traffic court stuff right here.
Paperwork. They just love to bog you down with paperwork. You know, if you have a business, you're supposed to like keep track of every receipt you use from the whole. It's just all there to like busy everyone up so they can't think about this stuff.
They don't give a crap about any of that, dude.
Something I definitely want to ask you about is, what do you feel about the world fairs? What do you think those were about? I personally feel like they were like a kind of a slap in the face. Like, we're going to bring you here and show you this old world right before we destroy it. What do you think? I could be way off. I don't know.
No, it was a bit. I think what we have to look at, though, is it had different functions depending on who saw it and what they did. So for the people at the time, in other words, the people who were actually alive in what we think of as 1890, although who the heck knows if that was the actual year. But
Right.
if the people at that time went through it, it did function a lot as we're told. It was to wow the people in a lot of ways. Look at all these cool things we can do, all this great technology. And you can find this mentality repeated time and time again, and not just in the World's Fairs. But if you go back and you watch the 1936 science fiction film Things to Come, the one based on the H.G. Wells book, look at that film and look at some of the stylings within that, and then think of what's going on exactly in that time frame. You know, the 1936, this little thing called the Great Depression was going on when they made this incredible film. And they even talked about the bombing of London, which happened 4 short years later after this film came out. I mean, it's really crazy when you start to pull these things apart. But nobody at the time that went through it, nobody at the time that went through it, they were just there to be wowed. Look at what we can do. But then, you know, from a historical perspective, the World's Fairs were largely neglected in history circles until the 2010s. And it was alternative researchers that brought it up. And I was still in the system at that time when there was an organized response to that. Because there was an organized response to it. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's interesting. Well, I got to hear about this.
People are bringing up these World's Fairs and they're getting all these crazy ideas. So how do we respond to it? How are we going to change the lesson plans to address this with the students? Because we have to address it.
And you were saying, so you were on the inside having this conversation with these people, them talking about the fact that this maybe, I don't know if they use the word, but crazy conspiracy is coming up and they need to figure out how to nip it in the bud, basically, and address it because there's talk about it.
Yeah, and of course they didn't call it that. They just simply said it was misinformation.
Yes.
And people were getting the wrong ideas from it. Mm-hmm. And you can actually go back and you can look at every document from academia, and it's still available online, and even the Quadrennial Defense Review from the United States in the early 2010s. Misinformation is a bad thing. We have to address it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And then it was about the mid-2010s it really started to get bad. They really started to get concerned about what was being said because they realized they weren't having the control, or perhaps I should say influence. That's the word they use. They didn't have the influence that they wanted.
I love it.
And so how are we going to address that? How are we going to discredit that? And these are how these lesson plans are going to read. And so when I go back to the World's Fairs, you have to think they serve different functions. And so originally it was about wowing the people. Well, now it's about discrediting the alternative research community. That is the intention of World's Fairs. That's how they're used now. Those were temporary buildings. Those were just events to show people to come together. But there was nothing there that was out of the ordinary. There was nothing there that was beyond the technological capacity, as we understand it, for 1850, to include that freaking Crystal Palace that they moved. Let's not forget that. Yeah. And all the other wonders. All the way through 1934. 1934 seemed to be the cutoff year. And oddly enough, things got really strange right around World War II because it was at World War II that you saw the end of all Art Deco buildings in the United States, at least according to the official chronology. There were no more Art Deco buildings. After World War II, brutalist BS as far as your eye can see.
Yeah.
I mean, they made some attempts, and oh my gosh, this is really sick now because now they're trying to say they're bringing back Art Deco. And my goodness, if you look at what they call Art Deco now compared to real McCoy, oh my gosh. I mean, it's horrible. But people will tell you this with a straight face. Oh, it's new Art Deco. Look at what we can do. And you try not to barf. And
it's like new Coke.
Yeah. Yeah, new Art Deco. It's got just a little hint of Satan.
Yeah,
ingrained within the construction there.
Dude, I don't know
That's
anything.
Funny that
I don't know anything about years, and I could be off and all that. But I know. So, I was in Europe, and we were in Berlin. And we had a day off, and I was like, oh, let's go for a walk. I literally ended up spending 12 hours walking because all the architecture was so amazing. It was like nothing I had ever seen in my life coming from America. Like buildings so high, just made out of stone. And I'm like, there's like, even that struck me as weird. And it's just like, the fact that that amazing stuff is still existing and still there, and we can't even do anything that good today, that tells me a lot. It was just a very impactful time for me. It was crazy.
All right. Well, I'm going to go in some dangerous territory here just to tell you how far they're trying to go with this.
Yep.
But perhaps you've heard of that new city down in Guatemala that they've tried to build. And perhaps you've heard of Sagrada La Familia, the cathedral they're building in Spain, which they've been building for over 100 years in that little story. They're trying to find ways to legitimately convince people today that they can build that way that they see, because too many people have asked the questions. Now, let's just say they could pool all their resources and pull off one single building, one single skyscraper,
over the course of 100 years, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or even let's just say they could do it in 20 years. Okay, that's great. That's one building. In the 1800s, they could do hundreds and thousands of these buildings all over the land in a 30 to 40 year time frame. And we're supposed to believe that? And most of the time they say they did them in 4 to 5 years. For example, the Georgia state capital, Atlanta, they did that baby in 4 years. A legitimate state capital with the dome and everything in 4 flipping years.
That's crazy.
Yeah, why do all the capitals have domes?
Domocracy or so.
Yes, I love it. So what about what do you think about the baby incubator stuff at the World Fair and stuff like that, and the whole orphan train thing? And do you think there's anything to that, or do you think it's nonsense?
I think there's a lot to it. It's just a question of how was it actually applied. I mean, I don't think they ever tell us the truth,
Of course.
but there's still images that were from it. They were showcasing it. And then by the time, because during that time, let's recall that our progenitors, our grandparents, they were very, very conditioned not to ask questions. They were very conditioned not to question or challenge anything because they were quite fearful. And in fact, my great-grandfather met his demise in an insane asylum in Central Hospital in Louisville, Kentucky.
Wow.
He went to 3 World's Fairs. That's all I really know about him, though. And you can go back and watch the Orphan Trains video. I recount that. But no, I mean, it goes to show you, though, that there was something behind it. And in my reset videos, I spell out that I think that was all behind this process that they have of conflict, assimilation, indoctrination. 3 steps. And they still use that process to this day. Because there's so much conflict. It's more regional.
Can you explain that in more detail? Because I think I could be wrong, but I want to hear that more, because I think you're saying something that I happened to say months ago with never hearing you say it. But can you go into that more, what you just said? The 3 steps?
So everything starts with conflict. I mean, you can look back, you can go through the 1800s, and there's not a year without conflict. There's a lot more conflict than people realize.
Yeah.
And that's never stopped. There's always an area of the land that's in conflict in some point in time. And even during 2020, they tried to say, oh, we'd finally achieved peace. No, there was still conflict going on in certain areas. It was just mitigated. But whenever you have a war, suddenly that justifies anything and everything. Movement of people, movement of resources. You're trying to achieve some deep-seated national goals, and it justifies anything. And so war, conflict becomes a great curtain, if you will, for anything and everything to happen, or people not to pay attention to what's really happening. It results in a shift in the society, a shift in where people are living, how they go about their lives. Then you go from there to assimilation. You're assimilating people into the shift after the shift. Now you can think of it as an ongoing reset. Heck, in China, they called it the Cultural Revolution. They're really spelling it out right there. So you're constantly keeping people in a state of diaspora. You're constantly moving people around, and then people are losing their sense of self. They're losing their sense of identity. And as long as you do that, you can pretty much get away with anything. And then the last step, indoctrination. And that's really what the World's Fairs were, the final step of indoctrination. And who knows what the actual timeline was. Did it really take them 50 years, or they do it in 2 to 3? We don't know. We've got photos that show cities that have been devastated across the land. Were they all fires that were 100 years apart, or did they all happen within 2 years of each other? We have no way of knowing.
Yeah.
Nobody's alive now that can tell us.
I had this crazy theory with the sorry, Death. You make sure to say what you were going to say right after, but I want to get this out before I forget it.
I got you.
The old asylums, the great buildings. There was all these people in asylums. I know it's a crazy theory. I can accept that. But I have a crazy theory that a lot of the people they put in these asylums were people who weren't willing to go along with the reset, with the new story. And they're like, you're crazy. We're going to put you in here and just do whatever and tell everybody you're crazy because you don't want to accept the new story we're telling you. We're going to go ahead and teach these kids that the heliocentric model, and we're going to teach you that the world started at this time, and we're going to teach you about dinosaurs, and we're going to teach you about all this crap. And the people who are saying, wait, that's not what I learned when I was a kid, they're like, you're going in an asylum, shut up, we're going to drug you.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of what it evolved into. I actually think
can't argue it.
I actually think they started off as being holding compounds for a lot of the people that they rounded up after the reset. Because there were a lot of people who would never have gone along with it. They'd have fought to the death, I guarantee you.
Yeah.
And that's why we had all these accounts of all these conflicts. And why is genocide always mentioned in historical documents? I mean, the one successful genocide that's mentioned, the Cathars, the Gnostics, and you'll find people now who even hate the mention of that philosophy. People who claim to be alternative researchers, they'll say they outright hate Gnosticism. It needs to be excised from the truther community. It's terrible. It's the devil. And it's strange to me because it's the one account of a successful genocide in the history of the land. Now we've got other accounts of people attempting genocide. It's never been successful except for that one time. So make of it what you will, but why would they ever allow any of these people to ever be mentioned in any historical document? Oh yeah, we had a war going on here. We had a war going on there. It was really nasty. Yeah, we killed millions of people. It wasn't a genocide though. Now look over here, U.S. Civil War.
People always say history was written by the victor. Me personally, I believe history is written by the bankers. That's what I think. The people with the money are the ones funding the books that are getting in the schools that are teaching us what happened, and I don't trust any of it.
And they're also backing both sides.
Yeah,
so,
that too.
That
too.
They already know who's going to win beforehand, probably. I think it's funny that you. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, are they backing both sides, or are they just playing both sides of a chess game? Yeah. That's another way to look at it.
Yeah.
Right.
They don't really back either one. They're just like, what?
It's gonna whatever it is, it's gonna benefit them in the end, and that's it. That's
exactly because if you're one person and you're playing both sides of a chess game, do you really care who wins? Does it matter to you?
Because because your agenda's getting taken care of right there.
Death, I see you sharing something down there. Is it pertinent at the moment? What's up?
This was just a pretty city in Guatemala that I found.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one they're trying to sell as the ability to build in the past. And if you look really closely at those structures, you'll find they do not pass the sense test.
Wait a minute,
it looks like a cookie cutter version. It's like a celebrity homes version of the
like a movie set.
Move that bus. No.
Go back up to that.
But yeah,
zoom in on that.
Can you click
beautiful beam footage?
Oh, come on, man.
What?
Dude, me and 5 of my cousins.
Is that barrel tile?
In 28 days. Come on.
28 days.
I don't know what's going on there, man.
Why not 17?
Look at these columns,
and when you look closely at the top of those columns, you can really see it too. I mean, it's amazing what they're trying to pass off.
It's crap.
It is. That looks nothing like nothing at all compared to it. That's crazy. Guatemala is not coming through.
Look at the basic rafters in it and everything. Like, get out of here, dude.
Yeah.
Dude, I don't think people have the capability of thinking the way that people did back then in order to envision these things that they created. I really don't.
Right.
They're like, yeah, let's just jot this down. I need to get paid and get back to my cell phone. Like, this is not the same.
That's another thing. You can't have people of today with their mindset trying to build this, right? Like, there's a completely different time, completely different mindset. I'm sure I would assume, right?
Well, do you want to know what the official historical explanation is for why you see all these Roman Greco buildings all over the land that look this way? They do try to address it, and it's quite comical. So,
yeah,
all right. The first period of building revival, so according to the official history, Roman Empire collapsed. You had the Middle Ages, the 1,000-year period, 500 to 1,500. But during that time frame, when 98% of the population were peasants, uneducated, couldn't read, couldn't write, couldn't build, couldn't do anything, they farmed and they died by about age 30. And then they died in many horrible ways. Yet they had this Gothic architecture revival that came prior to what they call the Renaissance, which was 1500. And they justify the Renaissance by saying, well, that's when we started going back and reading those Roman Greco documents, and we learned how they build these things. And that's how we were able to build these magnificent cathedrals, even though they were already building them before they did that.
Yeah.
They just called it Gothic, but whatever. And so that's how they say they had this. And then this happened again in 1760 when they said, well, it was the first archaeologist, old Johann. He went down there with his boofy hat on his head and went to Italy and explored all this stuff. And then everybody wanted to build like this across Europe. And that's how you explain that city hall in Edinburgh, Scotland, that looks like Roman Greco architecture. And oh, by the way, do you know you've got a statue of Alexander in the middle of the capital of Scotland?
No, sir.
A lot of people just look over that.
Oh my god!
Oh yeah, why do we have Alexander here? Well, I guess the Scottish were big fans of Alexander the Great. You know, I mean, he was Greek and all. Well, actually, he was Macedonian, but you know, I guess they could embrace that.
You know what? You know, we may not be able to build buildings like they did, but in front of the old buildings, did they have a cotton candy vendor? No, they did not. All right. So say whatever you
Another
want.
thing, everybody. It's not like everybody. Wow, look at this! They're just chilling, they're hanging out and stuff like it's just any other building around, right? Like, come on, man.
It kind of reminds me of one of those new strip malls that you would see that they tried before.
Dude, I was just thinking that. Yeah. Dude, like the outdoor strip mall.
How about
when they said
Cheesecake
the original
Factory?
mall was dead. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The pillars,
It's got
and
Applebee's
you
on the
touch them and
inside of
you're
it.
like, oh, my finger sinks in. It's just-
Yeah,
They added gyros to the menu.
those are foam
Whoa,
masons.
bro.
He did it.
I've heard it
He
said
did.
a lot of ways in my life,
Me too.
but I have never heard
Never
it
that
said
one.
gyros.
What do you call it? Gyro?
There's
Is it
gyro. I've heard
silent
white
G?
people say gyro. I've never heard gyro. I like this. I like it.
Alabama.
Well, we had a commercial here
It's
in
gyro.
town. We got like a big gyro place, as I would say. And the commercial was always like this. I'm pretty sure it was a Mexican guy on the commercial too, and he's like, "It's not gyros, it's gyros."
That's dude,
Oh,
you're racist.
Isn't
now.
it Greek?
That's
though?
it.
Isn't it Greek?
He's just saying gear in Spanish. It's gyro, all right? You're racist, and I don't like you anymore.
I'm so thrown right now, dude, because I thought it was Greek in the first place. Why is a
I
Mexican
know,
telling you how to
I know.
pronounce it?
Yeah.
Well, in America, you know, the kitchens are usually pretty full with the Hispanic culture. So I'm assuming that he was one of the kitchen guys.
We're going down a sweet road right now.
It's true, you
Rufus-
know. I'm not being
Rufus-
racist. I'm just pointing
Rufus?
out the truth.
Well,
Reel it in, Rufus.
if you step back and just look at the number of dialects there are in English alone, there's over 160 recognized dialects. That's why I just laugh when someone says, "You didn't pronounce this right."
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, over 160. Academia
I don't even know
recognized
one. I
Yeah,
think I mixed one of like three.
because English is spoken all over the land, and in some places it's spoken different than in others, and that's why it's just laughable when someone tries to tell you didn't pronounce that right. Well, according to 78 groups of people over here, I did.
Yeah.
So how is it
Yes,
not-
exactly.
Not only that,
I mean, some places it's Luke Ray, other it's Luker.
some places,
Exactly.
some places it's GIF,
Exactly.
some places it's GIF. You know, you never know.
Yeah.
But what I always tell people
I say
is
tomato, you say tomato.
all language is us making sounds with our vocal cords that people interpret. So if you knew what I was saying, guess what? I nailed it. So just don't try to tell me I said it wrong or spelled it wrong. I did it right because you knew what I meant. Period.
Well, and the
Yes.
reason I highlight it is that you see the real intention behind it. The intention behind it is it's to have people focus on certain nitty-gritty details and not think about the overall picture. I'm offended that you didn't pronounce that word properly. You didn't say my name properly. So I'm upset about it. I'm not going to think about anything else for the next 2 hours because I'm upset about the fact you didn't say my name properly. That's all I'm going to think about.
Wow.
Oh, but you did give me a hint on something that could help me find a lifelong secret, but I'm going to ignore it because you did not pronounce my name properly.
You didn't put in a
But
comma
that's what
where you're
happens.
supposed to.
Yeah, that's what happens though when you see how people are just affiliated with authoritarianism. It's in every facet of our lives, and we just overlook it a lot of times.
Yeah.
And you said
Now, I'm
something.
not saying we need some.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I'm not saying, that yes, we should embrace a chaotic, anachronistic, or anarchy society, although there are some benefits behind it. I'm saying that there are ways that you can exist and understand one another without falling victim to this. Well, I've been victimized myself because somebody said something.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how far they've taken that in just the last 20 years.
Something
It's
you
Yeah,
said
they really have.
before we actually started recording really rang true with me. You were talking about, because we were like just talking amongst ourselves while we were waiting, and you were like, oh, I don't get offended. Like, I literally tell people I don't know what the word offended means. I don't think I've ever been offended in my life. You may have said something that pissed me off because you were being a jerk, or you may have said something, but I've never been like, I can't believe they said that. I'm so offended by that statement. I don't even know what that means. I can't register that feeling. So
Well, that's probably because you're a sociopath.
that could be it. That could be
There it is.
Are you offended now?
I'm
You
offended.
bring it up, labels and all these other, this whole concept of psychology and labeling, classifying people. And, the big one now is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
Yeah.
Everybody's got it. Anybody
Yeah.
who's a kid and
Give
has a
them
lot
meth.
of energy, you must be ADHD. Yep.
That
Give them
Yeah.
meth or give them speed, and off you go, and everything's fine. Where's my Ritalin? Woo!
Yeah, they'll be
And that's
fine.
and that's what they're dishing out to these people. And does this really help? No.
No.
But everybody just buys into it because, well, these are people that have our best interests at heart. These are people that have always had our best interests at heart. Oh, wait a minute. Human experimentation by every university in the United States, 1940, 1960. That didn't happen. They apologized for it. Well, most of them apologized for it. That was ancient history. Don't think about it.
Dude, I'm sad that ADD wasn't like diagnosed when we were back in school when we were kids.
You're like,
because I had one of my
so
best
got some
friends.
Adderall, bro.
Oh, that too. But I mean, that's really not my thing. I like to go the other way. But one of my best friends in middle school and high school, his name was Adam, but he had 2 D's in his name. So we nicknamed him. At first, it was Adam with 2 D's, and then it was Double D. But now, if we had this, we would have just called him ADD. It would have been perfect.
Right.
He kind of was a little ADD too.
Dude, Rufus, I love you. I love your spirit, man. I freaking love it.
Yeah, I was on Adderall for all 4 years of high school.
I just shoot from the hip, man.
How'd you do?
Terrible. I was
Yeah.
calm.
So, Lucius, how'd you do in high school? I think you did
I was
pretty
bored
well.
in high school.
Okay.
I was bored. I was very bored, and I was very disengaged in high school. I couldn't wait to get out of there.
I asked
Dude,
this
that's
because
the fun.
yeah, I have a theory, and I think, Rufus, you're going to say the same thing, actually, so I didn't mean to cut you off, but, like, I
Go
think
ahead.
people who know, we naturally say, this is bullcrap. What they're telling us is nonsense, and your brain wants to ignore it. That's what I'm going to go with, so I don't feel like a scrub, but, whatever.
Yeah, and that kind of is that kind of is what I was gonna say, but I was going to
He's like,
kind of
kind of.
elaborate a little further.
It's like, you done? Now I'm going to say what I was really going to say.
No, go ahead, Rufus. Go.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
Before the thought goes out.
No,
Speaking
go.
of ADD,
Go.
before the thought disappears. But I was saying, like, back then, I think a lot of us understood that it was pretty boring, and most of it was probably crap, and the teachers were just telling us whatever they were told to tell us. And nowadays, though, there's so much more access to information than we had at that point. And I think now, instead of falling asleep in class, that the students might actually start challenging their teachers. And like things like, and since you were a professor, I thought it'd be a perfect to ask you this, but things like flat earth theory, I think that's going to be coming up a lot in school, in this younger generation of people who've kind of learned a different narrative of what the mainstream narrative. And what do you see coming as far as like how the teachers are going to deal with it? I know you touched base on it a little bit earlier, but I can see it becoming quite chaotic to where the teachers, they either don't know what they should teach anymore, or they might just give up altogether.
Well, I mean, it can go down like that, but they've already got a system put in place that defends against things like that. And that's just simply, you're going to get a test and you're going to pass it and you're going to fail it. And if you fail it, you're going to get held back. Oh, who wants to get held back? Or if you're in college, you're not going to get that degree. And if you don't get that degree, you're not going to amount to anything in life. Never mind the fact that you're owing $250,000 and you've got no way to pay it. And that's a conservative estimate. I mean, really, $500,000. I knew one of my students came back to me, and I think he owed $900,000.
What?
Oh my god!
2016.
shit!
By the way, I did not teach at a private university. Let me clarify that. This is a public institution.
What?
And this was a graduate student. I mean, he had spent 9 years.
At what point? 9 years.
9 years.
Oh my god!
And I mean, and he was a really good guy. He was a really bright guy, but he could never figure out the fact that he was
just wasn't for him.
No, I mean, he got all these degrees, and then he couldn't do anything with them because he didn't have the practical experience that they were looking for.
God, right. 9 years.
And so I ended up, we ended up having, and I hate the fact that I did this. I really feel awful about this, but he ended up on his own deciding to join the United States Navy as an officer and a nuclear engineer. And he ended up passing away a couple years later because of an accident that occurred because he was a little accident prone. Yeah. I mean, this is a really bad story, but I mean, I didn't suggest that he go that particular way.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was really telling to me that here's a person who felt like they had no other options and they were forced on this course of action. A lot of times,
talk about a system failing you.
Yeah.
Oh goodness. Well,
you
and
probably
that's
started
when you put your faith in this system. I mean, and everybody thinks, well, if you just do as you're told, they'll leave you alone.
Yeah.
But they don't.
No.
They don't.
And
they'll harvest you. They'll use you. They don't care.
Absolutely no offense to you as being a professor. And I do think there's a lot of there's a lot of careers that if you want to do them, college is necessary. Especially if you want to save lives, you got to go to college to be a doctor. If you want to be a lawyer and help people, you got to go to college. There's some things, but I will proudly say I did not go to college. And I am not $900,000 in debt. I am $0 in debt. So thank you for I did not do that. Thank you. God, man, that's insane. I can't even imagine being strapped with that debt and then the compromises you'll make in your career in order to pay that off. What pharmaceutical, if you're a doctor, what pharmaceutical company you'll take a kickback from because you're looking at your $1.2 million in college debt, in med school debt. What will you do? What will you compromise of yourself to pay off that debt?
Yes.
You can get your hand on. Yeah.
And now we know why college is so expensive.
Yeah.
Because then you kind of have to do whatever you're told so you can make up, however much you had to borrow to get through.
Well, and here's where it gets really crazy. When you step back far enough and you look at every sector of society. So look in the military, how are soldiers, sailors, and everybody treated there? They just make enough money, but then they're encouraged to spend it as fast as they can. Mm-hmm. They're encouraged to go in debt as fast as they can. Yeah. Or let's say you're working in a factory or an assembly plant or something along the line. Same principle. Or let's go up a perceived rung in the quote-unquote social ladder to middle management. It's the same dang thing, only you need to have a bigger house. You need to have nicer appliances. You need to have an 80-inch TV instead of a 77-inch. You need to go on vacation to here and here instead of just going to your local neighborhood park.
Yeah.
You need to do this.
Right.
And it's amazing how many people just jump right on board with this and never ask or think, gee, what do I really need? Is going on this silly vacation to this place that might be beautiful, but I don't know anything about it and I don't really care about it. Really what I need. But that's the whole intention behind it. You don't know yourself. You're conforming to what you're supposed to be.
You got to keep up with the Joneses, man.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. And it's that simple approach. It's very effective. And guess what? It's not limited to the societies that we think of as the classic capitalist democracy societies either. It happens everywhere.
Yeah, I'd imagine.
Gotta
keep up with the
even being
chieftain.
even being a mechanic, as soon as you start, the Snap-on truck rolls into the parking lot and it's like, hey, you need tools because you don't have any tools.
And we have all the ones
we got all of
you
it,
need.
and you can pay like $10 a week, bro.
Yeah.
Load up $10,000 worth of tools in the toolbox.
It'll just
Dude,
take
now
you
it's coming to the point where Dude,
Right.
they got pay as you go at the Walmart checkout lane now.
Oh goodness gracious!
You can
Yeah.
select
crazy.
that as an option. Well, I guess it's not the self checkout lane anymore because if you heard, they had to
Yeah.
get rid of the south. For some reason, they had to get rid of the
No, now they're just
self-checkout
charging you
lanes at
$100 to
Walmart.
use it or something. Yeah, you got to pay like a monthly fee to use it or something.
That's going to really help with the
Now I gotta-
velocity of the money.
Oh wow! But I mean, you think about it, it's all just to keep the system moving. I mean, does anybody really care about money? Is there a limit on it? You know, are we gonna actually collapse the economy? Is that ever gonna happen? Well, frankly, it should have happened many times.
Oh
but
yeah.
Yeah.
magically, it never did.
Yeah, right.
because
What if the
they
real
made the right moves when they needed to?
what if the
Oh.
real big psyop is that like nothing's gonna happen and it's never gonna
Ever.
collapse?
It's just gonna be
Just-
shitty
just
all the
tighter,
time.
slowly tighter and tighter and tighter.
Well, that's like
Everyone's waiting for like the movie Collapse to come out, and I don't see it happening
Collapse.
like that.
Well, at least not in that facet because it doesn't serve any of the ends. I mean, if you think about it, if the
Right.
economy really legitimately collapsed and nobody had that incentive anymore, well, then all control is instantly lost. I mean, if it descends to anarchy and no one's working for their money, or rather their idea of money, then well, we can't have that. That people might think for themselves, and that's frightening. Can't have that.
Yeah, it's not allowed. So, what do you think right now, if you had to tell the most important message you could give to anybody, what's the biggest threat that people should be paying attention to right at this moment?
It's always been the same threat, and that is losing control of your self-agency. And in fact, we are all indoctrinated to give up our self-agency from the moment we are born. That has always been the threat, and that will always be the threat. Now, they can do anything physically that they want to, but if you're not making your own decisions, then the next thing you know, you're going to get marched off into some crazy land and die some senseless death. Or you're going to work for 80, 90 years, achieving nothing, and then not bettering yourself as you should because you gave up your self-agency. Now, if you decide on your own, which is not the easiest thing to do, that maybe you need some things in your life, maybe you want some material things in your life, that's fine. But that's the most important message I can give you. Decide what to do and who you're going to be on your own. That's the most important message. Now, it's not what you're going to That's not what you're going to hear from a lot of people. They're going to tell you there's a reset coming and you need to do A through Z to be prepared for it.
Right.
Well, maybe, but guess what? If in doing that, suddenly you become at the behest of another's agency and you fall under the control of another, which tends to be what that approach is designed around, then lo and behold, it doesn't matter. Well, I survived the reset, but now I'm picking away at this salt mine until
it's more like a transition than a reset.
Exactly.
Right?
And people fall for that all the time as well. So, I mean, whether we're here physically for a finite amount of time or whether we're just stuck here indefinitely, which is the biggest fear of mine, at least you can still have self-agency. That's the only thing you can guarantee that you have. And I understand people have to do things to survive in life. I don't denigrate people for that. I understand a lot of people made compromises from 2020, but they've always done that.
Yeah.
Just as long as you retain your self-agency, that's the most important thing, because that's what they seem to be trying to take away from us every single day.
Yeah.
That's why we're here, man. That's why we're here.
I also think,
Go
ahead, Rufus. Yeah, finish.
No, go ahead. It's fine.
I was going to say, I also think that that's part of why they attack us. They don't want us to feel to be ourselves. They want to attack everything we say, everything we do, all that, so we feel stupid. So we feel like, oh, you're an idiot. This has been in science books for this long. Didn't you learn this in high school, moron? This was the story. They want to make us feel like we're stupid, so we give up. And I, for one, am not giving up, and I guarantee you're not giving up. I can tell just by how you talk about it. You're not giving up. So we're not going to let them take that from us. That's just what I wanted to say. Sorry. Because they want to, for sure.
Well, because if they could just snap their fingers and shut us down, they would. But it doesn't work that way. Now, people say, well, there's a theory that they have to disclose things, blah, 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 blah. I don't subscribe to that either. I don't believe that. I mean, if they had to disclose things to us, then why are we indoctrinated from birth? No. They don't have to disclose anything to us. In fact, if I wanted to stop people from searching for things on their own, I would tell them that. We have to disclose things to you, see? So, what it's hidden in plain sight. So just stop asking questions. The truth is right there. It's just a great way. I mean, everything to say to get people to consider other things or at least not consider their own self journey. And believe me, they've got every trick in the book that you can imagine. Now, I'll just share this with y'all. One thing I am aware of, and I'm not going to name any specific names, but I am well aware that there are many individuals out there that are operating on the behest of putting out information that is, how shall we say, erroneous. And they are very well supported. And the reason I know this is because I had to assemble information packets for these people to read so they could then, how shall we say, put in their productions, if you follow me.
Yeah.
Now,
Wow.
I don't have to tell you who these people are. You can figure it out just by listening to what they say. The messages are very clear.
Yeah.
If you are conscious and you're self-aware, it will become clear. And I'm not saying this I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. I'm just letting you know that, yes, I participated in information collection to help brief these people as part of the response to this concept of alternative research that was becoming more and more powerful last decade.
I have to ask a crazy question, and if the answer is no, just tell us no. I'm totally fine with it. Once we're done recording, is there any chance you'll tell us who those people are? I have to ask, man. If we cross our fingers and promise not to put it out. No, I'm kidding.
I won't put it on Twitter, bro. I promise.
I'm just messing with you. I'm like, oh my God, I want to know. I respect it, though. I respect it. I'm just messing
How
with
about
you.
I tell you this? I can tell you exactly how you can figure this out.
Okay.
There's
That
a
works.
very
There you
easy
go.
way you can figure this out.
He's like, do your own research.
Yeah.
He's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I'm out.
It should be fairly obvious, I
It is
think.
what it boils down to. Do your own research. Pay attention to what's being said. But I'll tell you this. If there are around 2 to 3 themes that are present and repeated ad nauseum, and it doesn't detract from that at all, you'll know. You'll know. And it doesn't matter what the heck they're saying or what they're trying to push across. You'll know. You can also tell by how certain individuals are, how shall we say, regarded or disregarded by the community. It's very interesting because it seems as though some people can figure out exactly what's going on, and they can tell who's legitimate and who's not.
Right.
Or at the end of the day, just go off of your intuition. And I mean, it's not some crazy conspiracy theory game that they want you to think. Just use common sense.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
do you
Oh,
really
yeah.
think that? Here's an example. Okay, I'll just go off of one of the base templates. Do we do live streams or don't we? Never do live streams. Live streams are death. Don't do live streams. Hint, hint. That's all I'll say. Okay.
Nice.
Because
love it.
live streams are dynamic human interaction. And no matter what they want you to believe, there's no such thing as a program, although we call everything artificial intelligence, but let's call it what it is. It's a program. There is no program that is dynamic. You know, therefore there's no true artificial intelligence. But just keep telling people that, okay? You know, and they've even tried to undercut that. It's artificial intelligence. That picture you're showing, it's artificial intelligence. No, it's not. It's just crappy computer graphic artwork. That's all it is.
Right.
And a lot of times I mix images in my presentations because if I show all good for UHD images, then, you know, there's technical issues with the video. And that's what I say. Oh, it just has random technical issues. So I mix in a little bit of everything. And I don't care what people say. They're going to say what they're going to say because they have to. They're supposed to.
Yes.
Right.
If you follow me.
Dude, that's a big thing with
Yes.
me. Like, a lot of people will say, like, I post some stuff that I'm not positive if it's true or not, but it's about the comments. It's about the interactions. I want to hear what other people say. And because Google told you it's not true doesn't mean it's not true. Like, I want the community to interact and tell us what they think. Maybe someone has some information. Maybe someone doesn't. Like, I posted a thing about the eclipse today. Whether anything weird's going to happen or not, there's people telling me, yes, this happened. My schools are closed. This is going on. That's going on. So to get people interacting and talking is a big part of it in my mind.
Well, and it is, but it's to make sure that people are talking about the right things or to make sure that they're talking about things in the right context. Here's an example. I'll disclose this as well. Alternative research originally actually came from the mainstream. You might be surprised to know. And I can prove that to you. Go back and look where alternative research really had its origination from. And no, I'm not talking about any of the professors. I'm just talking about how the mainstream started with it. In the 1970s, they had to respond to several disclosures that had gotten out. So how did they do it? They encouraged alternative research. And the whole point behind that was to say, Yes, there's truth. Okay. We know there were some mistakes that were made, but we have people who were outside the system who actually told you the truth. And then the government had to address it, or whatever authorities, it doesn't matter. I mean, it wasn't always the government, it was what academic institution or whatever, it doesn't matter. They addressed it, and the problem has been rectified. And it's just a repeat of that same process that was done before. The problem is, the challenge, there were too many people who were reached far too quickly. In other words, the system that they designed to reach everybody was actually used against their intentions in a way they did not anticipate. And it scared them. I mean, you could tell there was a frightened knee-jerk response to this.
Do you see that happening with the internet?
Pull it all together with what happened at the start of this decade, maybe not. But tell me, was there ever a knee-jerk reaction like that at least we were aware of?
Oh, yeah.
Are you talking about COVID?
I'm alluding to that, yes. But
we're totally cool.
For everything, pretty much, yeah.
Even before that, dude.
That was going on. That was just what you were supposed to pay attention to.
Yes, exactly.
But there was a heck of a lot more that was going on. There was authoritarianism that was ramped up to level 99 when it had never been moved up beyond a 2 or a 3. And nobody caught on to that. Well, until we were, a year and a half into it. Finally, people caught on. Oh, wait a minute. Well, why has authoritarianism been ramped up to, beyond anything that the guy with the mustache would have ever dreamed of? At least what we're told on his first day.
At least what we're told.
Yep.
Highlight.
Yeah, exactly. That's the point.
Yes.
But, I mean,
so many big numbers.
And you see this. You see this with the way they ramped that up, the way they were trying to basically not just control every segment of society, but also different geographical areas. For example, go to one county and you could go to eat at a restaurant and you could just sit there and not have to put anything on, if you follow me. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm talking a little bit of code here.
Yes, we get it.
And why was that? Because this was an area where many of the leaders went to vacation, right? But then if you went to the actual capitals or any university, guess what? The county law superseded the U.S. Constitution, and we'll leave it at that.
Magically, I know, it's awesome.
You can tell Lucius has had to navigate the YouTube BS.
I was going to say, he must be fire at it.
That is
so good.
Has YouTube given you the hammer ever before, or warnings, or what?
Let's just say I've gotten the subtle warning, so I tread carefully.
Your content, I feel like, is fairly innocent, man.
Yeah.
But I mean, anything could just have the switch flipped on at any time. And the other thing I make sure that I do is I always present the mainstream perception in every single video.
Yeah.
Because if you do that, then if they shut that down, then what they're saying is, oh, well, the mainstream perception is a lie.
Smart.
And I always say, I always consider the mainstream perspective. I don't write it off. It's possible. Although it's very unlikely.
That's a cool story, but I'm gonna go with that your YouTube's channel has never been struck down because you're a government operative, bro. That's what I get every day. So
nailed it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we all are.
Fed Theodore Logan.
I know.
Dude, you say you were referring. Dude, there's so many things that you referred to and it's moving really fast. But one thing was your biggest fear is that we're just stuck here. So were you talking about where you get reincarnated, or elaborate on that a little further?
Soul Trap.
I've listened to Howdy Mikowski, and I think he does a really good job of presenting a lot of ideas. And I think he's one of those. He seems pretty legitimate, but he gets overlooked for a lot of reasons. Probably because he is pretty legitimate by certain people.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. So the people that are really searching for things are going to find it, and others aren't. I don't know if I would call it a soul trap. I think it's just the personal fear I've had is that I can never remember not being alive. I know that sounds like a double negative.
I get it.
Dude.
I've said that since I was a little kid. Dude, you're freaking me out. Go ahead.
And that's why I'm frightened, because I have all these images of other realities, other lives that I never experienced in this one. And I had this happening from back when I was a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always been with me. And so it fuels that fear that I have that, oh goodness, I mean, is there ever any relief? I mean, am I really going to die at some point, or am I just going to completely forget it? And then the next thing I know, I'm reinserted somewhere else, or maybe the same thing, and I'm just stuck on a recursion loop that I can't get out of.
How do you
That
feel
sounds
about
like you didn't accept Jesus Christ in a past life.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was gonna say.
Maybe
How do
that's
you
where your intuition comes from.
How do you feel about the fact that we chose to be here and that we're here to learn a lesson and that we keep going until we learn that?
I think that's a bunch of guff. I mean, I'm just.
I do too. But I'm just throwing
who would
stuff at
choose
you
that?
that I've heard, and I want to see what you say. You know.
And look, I don't disrespect anybody's beliefs, and I know they always want to say that, and people have to justify it. You know, people have to have hope, but I think there's different ways to have hope than to try to reach out for something that everything seems to work against. You know, for example, they have to disclose things to us. No, they don't. I mean, that to me, that's a forlorn hope. The hope that you can really have: empower yourself, become knowledgeable yourself. You can grow, even if we're stuck here or whether we're not. It doesn't matter. You should still work to improve yourself. You should still work to gain awareness. And most importantly, build your personal individual strength, the inside will to do anything and everything. We have that capacity, and that's something one can prove. But outside of that,
So we're at almost an hour and a half, and I really want to, like, dude, you have a brain I love. I really want to ask you about some things that may be off topic to you, kind of like they've heard me do it in the past, like rapid fire about things that people think are crazy, and I want to see what you think on them. Like, so let's just start off with chemtrails. What do you think about chemtrails? Contrails.
It depends.
Excuse me. Sorry.
It depends. I believe there may be something to the theory that there's something within them that may be affecting the environment or us in some way, but it could also just simply be something that we're supposed to see and be reacting to. Or
Yes, that's what I kind of think too.
One of the things that I think there's a lot of is there's a lot of the quote unquote placebo effect that's pushed across with us.
Right.
That if we believe something, we're going to make it true.
Right.
And so, I mean, because let's be honest, contrails have been around. I can remember them since I was a little kid, and that was a hell of a long time ago. So, but I mean, you can find them in certain videos and in other places, but then there's even places in the land you can go to, Bosnia, for example, where you won't see any contrails, not a single one.
I remember contrails. Right. I remember watching them disappear shortly behind the trail, but I can honestly say when I was a kid, I don't remember seeing them linger for hours and spread out and move with the clouds and stuff like that.
Going on and then shutting off and then going on again and shutting off.
I mean, it makes sense too, yeah, because why would they want to like poison themselves and their families too?
Personally,
you know?
I don't think it's poison. I think natural things are happening in the sky that they don't want us to see, and they're trying to block them out with seeding clouds. That's what I think. Because I am one of the personal people who do agree with that I don't think any pilot, no matter how much you paid them, would spray something over an area that their family lived that was going to hurt their family, at least not with their knowledge. So I firmly believe that either they're not spraying poison or they don't know they're spraying poison, one or the other. But I think it's about blocking out natural stuff in the sky that they don't want us to see. That may be crazy, but that's just what I think. So deal with it.
Well, it's safe to say, though, that they seem to have increased the amount of, how shall we say, theatrical displays in the sky from, say, 30, 40 years ago. Theatrical displays have increased. Now you could say, well, it's because we've got better technology. You know, we don't have a Condor anymore, but, you know, who needs that? Concorde, I'm sorry.
Concorde,
Condor, I know but Concorde. You know, the ability to fly from New York to Paris in 3 hours. Remember Superman 2?
Yeah. They took
We're not doing
away.
that now. Yeah. It was too loud. People complained. What people? People who live next to the airport, they weren't already complaining?
People who realized that the pilots weren't downing the nose of the plane at the accuracy to adjust for the curvature. Those are the people who complain.
Yes. That and the ones who, how many gallons of fuel are allegedly in the wings, sloshing around in the wings of the plane?
Yeah, let's not get started
Yeah.
on that one with the
Yeah.
whole concept.
So let's jump
Yeah,
on to
no,
something
we'll play
else.
that part
So,
back.
what do you think about DEWs, direct energy weapons? What's your take on those? I'm just picking your brain
There
because
are-
you seem like a really smart dude, and I want to see what a smart dude thinks about these things.
Well, it's they've already had directed energy weapons. They've had them for a long time, and that's
Right.
hardly any kind of secret. It's very well known, and it's something they openly admit to.
Yep.
But what I think we don't understand is the amount of variations that they have, and perhaps it doesn't just function on an energy level, it functions on other levels that we don't understand. Sound, vibration, the entire concept with that. There might be a vast variety of weapons that have a surgical destructive capability along with a wide area destructive capability. Because look at what's so stupid about what they tell us about nuclear weapons. They're useless. They destroy everything. So what's the point behind them? But if you had a weapon that you could destroy a single room in a house with, and then you could destroy a city with that same weapon just by changing settings, how useful would that be?
Oh,
How
hell
useful
yeah.
would that be?
Yeah.
Well, do you
Wow.
think it would be safe to say that 5G can be considered a directed energy weapon, or?
I think it has more a different application. I think someone's trying to influence our perceptions above all else. Again, trying to get us to attack ourselves from the inside. Because one of the things I've suspected is that whoever this, we'll just call it this adversarial power that we're arrayed against is really all about, they have the ability to actually try to attack us from the inside out. And I think that's something that we oftentimes try to neglect.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that, they have this ability and they can do it against your will. No.
Right.
But they have ways to do it very subtly that you're not fully aware of it. And then by the time you become aware of it, you're used to it, and it's very, very hard to wean yourself off of it. Let's just take someone who drinks soda, for example. We talked about hyperactive kids earlier. Well, you have that one cup of Coca-Cola every week, and then the next thing you know, you're just jumping all around and losing your mind about it. There was a film I reviewed from the 80s called The Stuff, and that actually came out during the Cola Wars. I highly suggest you watch it if you're bored. It's a well-made movie.
Okay.
And it's very, very interesting because somebody was trying to send a warning for how products can be used.
I feel like
to,
I
how
saw
can we
that.
say-
I feel like I've seen that.
I did a review on it in August, and it had technical difficulties shortly after I published it.
Oh, wow.
Of course.
Oh.
Always. So are you alluding to like some sort of mass formation psychosis?
There may be. I mean, I don't know
Attacking from
if
the
it's mass
inside.
formation, but I think people try to influence us on the individual level. And they try to change us from the individual level to sabotage our ability to be effective beings. I think that happens every single day in ways that we're not even fully aware of.
I agree.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So what do you
And
think?
it's just done in such a subtle way. It's not a conspiracy. We're trying to help you. We're trying to keep you informed. There's always good reasons for it.
Of course.
But if you step back and you think about it, how much of that stuff legitimately helps you in any way?
Lucius just made dudes like way scarier.
So what do you think about
You
stuff
shouldn't be
like,
worrying about that stuff,
No, not at all. Like
It's
Project,
gonna, I mean, that's just gonna rot your brain.
like
Whether you want it or not.
rot your brain. Don't think about it. Don't. So like Project Bluebeam. What do you think about that?
I think a lot of it was just misinformation that was released, and they try to every now and then they'll shoot up what you call a red star cluster, and that's to get everyone's attention because everybody talks about it, everybody knows about it. Just like the secret organizations everybody knows about. And I think that's one of them because there's a lot of documentation to it that indicates that it's something you're supposed to pay attention to.
Right.
But that's not to say that something along those lines didn't happen that nobody knew about or nobody talked about.
Okay.
So I think that's the way to approach that.
So you also
Those
mentioned
are alien crap then?
Yeah. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Not what we would think of traditionally as aliens. No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right.
I
All right.
agree.
All right.
But if there's more of a physical realm that's accessed in ways we don't understand, I think there is a high likelihood of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if you go back and you watch, trying to remember the exact video, Tartaria Descends into Madness, that's where I posited some theories on how a previous civilization may have accessed another realm of chaos, if you will, and where they inadvertently let in some sort of force that's still with us to this day. I mean, it's a theory. Can't prove it, but there's a lot of inclinations towards it.
Okay.
Because I don't believe that there was any sort of external threat that ever could have challenged a unified human civilization in the past. But if you're able to erode it from the inside out, if you're able to turn its implements on itself, for example, subvert the government and subvert the individual, then it becomes very possible. Absolutely. And I think we can see examples of that still happening to this day. So much focus is just put on subverting us from just being happy, relaxed individuals every single day.
Yes.
Yeah.
That brings me back to another question, because you mentioned earlier people who just kind of go along to get along, and it goes along with, because we try to ask people like something off their specialty. So what do you think about like the whole NPC theory? Do you think there's people who aren't dialed in, who don't have souls, whatever you want to call it? What do you think about like people who are just space fillers, if you will?
They got to go home and plug themselves in at night.
No, I wouldn't say like that, but like that just don't have inner monologue, don't have thoughts like we do, don't examine things like we do. They just go to work, go home,
walk into walls over and over and over again.
Basically.
So if you ever watched, and they destroyed this show right away, Westworld, the new version of Westworld from the 2010s. The first season of that show was incredible and spectacular.
It's my favorite season of television ever.
It was
season
really
one.
Good. Yep,
season one.
And I remember watching the premiere episode of season 2, and you could tell they had just blown that show out of the water.
Like it got too real.
You know, like, oh boy, they did this. I'm surprised it got this far. But I'll refer to an episode, the episode title from the end of season 1. It was called The Bicameral Mind. And if you think about it, there are people who do have that inner monologue that you discuss, that inner awareness. Now, does everybody have the capacity for this? I believe most, if not all people do. But do a lot of people spend their entire lives trying to prevent this and just have the monocameral mind, if you will, or just the only mind of looking outward? Now, there are times when having that outward mind is very useful, especially if you're in a survival phase and you need to be aware of everything that's going around in your physical surroundings. But if you use that inner monologue, you suddenly become susceptible to control from that avenue and you're not even aware of it. And that's what that episode was about before they completely blew that show out of the water. It was about the hosts in Westworld developing that internal monologue and having the bicameral mind. Because if you have the bicameral mind, you achieve self-agency. You are the master of your own destiny. Everything goes against that.
I mean, I think we're all just better off sitting around playing Pokemon Go all day. You don't have to think about it, you know?
Well, if you think about it, I mean, how do distractions start? It goes all the way back to the concept of bread and circuses, you know? And I'll admit, I used to really love sports. I loved watching college sports, you know, the big three. You know, I grew up in middle America, you know, baseball, football, basketball, you know, all the time, getting excited about it, especially the latter two. But over time, I started to realize, oh, wait a minute, this is just kind of the same thing over and over again. The only thing that changes is the names of the coaches, the names of the players. And there we go again and again and again. And so you start to realize it is just that. It's a distraction. I even remember the Star Trek episode where they talked about how it was a distraction. The original series, Bread and Circuses.
Yep, I saw that. I know what you're talking about. It's crazy.
But I mean, it's amazing how much they slipped into 3 seasons of that show. And, you know, that's something else that they've worked on blowing out of the water in the 21st century. Now they even make fun of what original Star Trek used to be. They do it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Oh, we've got an animated series that does it. We've got newer series that does it. And we might have another movie that'll do it, even though the previous movies already did it. I mean, because the original series of Star Trek did present a lot of these old world messages for us. And you don't see people like that. You don't see people who understand each other, who relate well together, regardless of their external differences. Oh, no, they don't want that. I mean, I'll never forget the episode where Lieutenant Uhura says she's not afraid of words. Words have no power over her. Holy crap! I mean, that was in the third. That was in the third season. What they consider the worst season of that show. Nope, words don't have any power over me. Wow, how amazing! Nobody could say anything like that today. But of course, if you watch the current incarnation of Star Trek, you have the helms person when they fight the Romulans say, "Wow, we actually hit them." But I mean, it's just reflective of everything. I mean, yeah, it's a science fiction show taking place in, you know, a theoretical area that we may or may not be able to reach in a way we don't know or understand, but we think we do. But the lessons of how people act and how they interact with each other, that's the real message in it. I mean, that's why the original series of Star Trek was popular, the way the characters were, who they were.
I agree.
And then as time went on, they were slowly eroded and denigrated. I mean, you can find the most obvious example with old Jean-Luc Picard. Remember how he was, and you know, the first season he's surrendering all the time, but finally he became a strong character. But then, you know, they had to bring that back, and they had to destroy that. Oh, no. You know, now he was a privileged individual, and he should just hate himself. And we should all hate ourselves. It's just the only thing that changes is why we should hate ourselves. You know?
Especially if
everybody
you're
should
a white
have a good
male.
reason to hate themselves.
If you're a white male.
Yeah.
Well, you want to know what? It's not just that. Yeah, that's one of the areas, but it goes to everybody.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing: if you admit that you're superior or inferior, you're falling into that particular line of thinking.
Yeah.
Right.
And you're not defining yourself. You're letting someone else define you. That's really what it's all about. And it's a very insidious trap because it works both ways. Oh, I should never let this happen. I was a victim, or no, I'm not going to allow the fact that I'm from the superior mindset. You know, my group is superior to your group. So therefore, I mean, it works both ways.
Right.
And I think it's one of the ways that you could say we're hijacked from achieving self-agency, because suddenly we put the needs of this little group above us. Now I'm going into individualism and collectivism, and you can go back and watch Patrick McGowan's The Prisoner if you want lessons on that. So
something else I wanted to ask
Thank
you
you.
about. What's up with the Star Forts? Because I have been to 2 of them myself, and I can tell you that when I go there, I've felt energy that's different than anywhere I've ever felt before. And places have energy for sure. So I'm just curious what your take is on those, because I know the stories about how they were built is complete nonsense. So,
you know, military fortifications from the 15 to the 1800s that were never very effective as military fortifications.
yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
So I took, for a while on the channel, I took to calling them geometrically precise foundation structures, and it was a bit of a joke. GPFSs or geometrically precise foundation structures.
Nice.
I saw that, but the reason I did that is because I believe they are from a civilization that came before the civilization that preceded ours. So third era, maybe second era, though I suspect third era. And you know, I'll even informally call them the Star Fort builders. And I think that a lot of those structures are the base foundation structures that the civilization that preceded ours built on top of in a lot of ways. Because you'll see Star Forts in a lot of unique locations like Malta and all over the land where they have these very elaborate Star Forts.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you saw one of the most impressive ones that I looked at in Portugal. And someone tried to tell me, well, you can't just bypass it. Oh, why can't you bypass it? I mean, it's an open terrain. It's not in a mountain pass.
Yeah.
And I might know a little bit more about military tactics than I let on. Yeah, the preferred course of action is you bypass fixed fortifications. You don't attack them frontally. We can't leave your 6 undefended. Well, they did it all the time. The Germans did it very well in World War II, supposedly, but you know, whatever. United States Army did it very well in Iraq a couple different times. They didn't care because it works. But why would you put all this effort into building these fixed fortifications in the 1700s and they never worked anyway?
Yeah.
Right.
So it makes more sense that they're the remnants of the buildings of a previous civilization. And the reason you feel that energy is probably because they were infused with the, I don't want to sound something that seems a little flowery or metaphysical, but I think they had a better understanding of vibrational aspects of natural energies, and they managed to infuse that in the building. And that's why you see things such as grass, trees, and everything. It does so well around the legitimate star forts.
Yep.
It grows in conjunction with them. They had a better balance. The energy is strong there because they infused it with that energy when they built it from the ground up. That was the kind of technology they had.
Yep.
And you can find many examples everywhere. And the concrete, the building material, there is nothing that compares to it. And don't go telling me it's some cement that they had. They just innovated when they needed it for the Erie Canal. That's a bunch of
or that they shipped 3 million bricks to the most extreme island on the Keys and then went further and said, hey, let's ship all the bricks here and build a fort that has very little defensive strategy position whatsoever. But we're going to put multiple, what they claim they built it in 2 years, which is complete nonsense, because even to get the bricks there without roads, without modern ships, it's insane to think that they claim they built it in like a year and a half or 2 years. But
you're talking about Fort Jefferson and the Dry Tortugas?
yes, down there. And I've been
Up
to
in
the
Florida.
one in St. Augustine. There's one there too. And neither one of them are what they say they are, for sure.
Oh, no, nothing close. And there's many more all over the place to be found.
Yeah.
Some in other states have repaired than others that they've preserved. Probably one of the most, the largest ones that are still intact are the entire city ones. And what you'll find is in all the original maps of the older cities and even the newer cities, like, for example, New Orleans, you'll see it was actually in an entire star fort pattern on the original map.
Wow.
And all of them are by
I didn't-
water, right? At least to my knowledge,
Well,
all star forts are near
Most of them are by water. They're either by a large body of water or they're by a river.
Yeah.
And I haven't even started to look into rivers and how they could have been used, and the fact that there seems to be a, dare I say, original artificial component to rivers. But that's a bit of it's a bit of an out there theory that people don't like to hear.
Dude, I was gonna ask. I actually had something written down to ask you about. Have you ever seen like how they electrify wood and it kind of sprawls out and looks like a river?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And there's a lot of indications that the previous civilizations had the ability to change the way the river flowed. Imagine how useful a river would be if it could flow downstream and upstream. And the funny thing is, defenders of the mainstream narrative try to say, well, there was a river there, they could do everything, but the river only flowed one way. It always only flowed one way, out to sea.
Yeah.
So, you know, how in the hell are you going to build Minneapolis and St. Paul in Minnesota, right about where the Mississippi starts, not too far from it, in record time, but it only goes down all the way to New Orleans? It doesn't make any sense.
Well,
and
you
you still have to move stuff off the river up the hill.
You just don't understand how the spinning ball works, bro. That's what it comes down to.
I know. It's that spinny ball. It's the Doppler effect that nobody can prove. Blah blah blah.
I love that you have a sense of humor.
Oh
That's
yeah.
awesome.
So, what are your thoughts on the shape of the Earth?
Well, I have a rather extreme theory, and I tried doing a live stream on it, and I was allowed to do it, but then shortly after, it had the usual technical issues that came down with it. But I could tell that the response I got for even doing it was not acceptable, even though I said, and we're told by the mainstream that we're on a sphere or an oblate spheroid. You know, I said that first, even. You know, I just spewed it all out. You know, we're whipping around the sun at warp drive and all that other good stuff.
Engage.
But yeah, pretty much. Make it so, or
Yes,
engage and make it so. There we go. But I think that the existence is beyond our ability to perceive, because I suspect that there have been some drops in terms of what the nature of the land really is. And I suspect that there are components of it that we cannot see with our eyes, we can't perceive, but we're aware of in a different portion of our mind. And I suspect that perhaps whether it's a spatial existence or even something beyond that, we're actually in a tesseract or a four-dimensional existence. In other words, you have overlapping different areas that can be accessed at certain points in time, but then they can't be accessed at other points in time. This explains why you have different land masses that can be seen on certain times, but then can't be seen during other times. This also explains why you have so much inconsistency between reported sightings and maps on timelines. Now, that could be completely wrong, but I think there is something to that. And there's something that you see, it's actually where the mainstream agrees with what's talked about in legend and myth. And also talk about how many of the quote unquote three-dimensional crosses that you see, that when you actually put them together, they're a tesseract. Or
Right.
a hypercube, the cube within a cube, the nested cube concept.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
So I think it's a lot more complicated than we realize.
Okay.
I'm
That's
starting to
fair.
think that. I'm starting to think that a little bit too, man. And I think the only thing that's fair to say is, no matter what we think we know,
We don't know.
you know,
And,
there's
and
no
even
way to
say
truly
that
find
so,
out.
It's so controversial to people because, I mean, people have to grip onto something. And I'm going to let you in on a little something here as well. It has become acceptable to large components within the mainstream to accept the flat theory again. That might surprise you. But it's true.
Yeah.
It
Well,
has
they don't
become
have.
acceptable.
They don't have a choice, man. We're coming out hard.
Yeah.
We are. We're riding it hard.
I just want anything but that stupid ball.
Anything but the damn ball,
Dude,
man.
I'm open to the electric universe. I'm open to all of
Yeah.
it except what they tell us. All I know is
Yeah.
it measures flat, like Death said. Like we can see further than a curve. There's a lot of stuff that's going on that does not line up with their theory. And lack of a better theory from them, we have to resort to what we can measure ourselves. So until we find out the truth, this is what we got. It's a level topographical plane that's not spinning. Period. All the rest is speculation. We don't know what the moon is. We don't know what stars are. We don't know what quote unquote other planets are. We don't know. But we know that from what we can test and measure from here, it's not what they tell us it is. Period.
I think the
Yeah.
main thing, the reason why flat Earth is a good thing and why it's so effective is because that's the simplest way that you can get people away from the ball.
Yeah. But to be clear, we don't expect everyone to agree with us. We just want everyone to look into stuff. Like, don't listen to me. I'm just a dude. I'm just a guy who found some stuff and is trying to share it with you. Don't agree with what I say. Try to prove me wrong. Dig into stuff yourself. Find the stuff yourself and come at me and we'll have a conversation. I never claim I know what is. I know what isn't. And let's talk about it. That's where I'm at.
Well, the dialogue learning method that is discouraged immensely. That it's amazing how that's changed as well.
Yeah.
And I can even tell you how there's been a lot. I witnessed a lot of historical revision firsthand from 1990 to 2019. Here's an example. What did people in the United States in the 1800s believe the shape of the land really was? Flat.
Yep.
Then about 10 years ago, they believed and they knew it was round. Wait, what?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, by the way, in the Middle Ages, they believed and
Yeah.
they knew it was round. Wait, what? Seriously? But Columbus, Columbus, he had that crazy thought that it was round and da 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 da. Oh well, no. They all knew that. That's just it's kind of a story we told you when you were younger. I mean, that's kind of what they've come out and said. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It is.
But it's classified under historical revisionism.
Yeah.
And then you ask the question, wait a minute, how can historical revisionism apply now? Well, because it's well documented. We acquired some new evidence, and Mary Beard studied Rome from a different perspective, and she knows what happened 2,000 years ago because these documents are available, and she's an expert. Okay, so write your paper and make sure you support her thesis. Okay, you're not going to get funding.
So I have one more crazy out there theory I want to ask you about. What do you think about the germ theory versus terrain theory?
The only germs I think are the ones that get in our minds.
Yes.
I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's all I needed to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, fade it out.
You know how many times I should be dead by now if any of that were true? How many
Yes.
times past infection should have killed me? Not even past the age of 8. How many times I cut my hands playing in the dirt, doing all this different stuff. I've waded through canals in the Middle East that were filled with all kinds of unknown stuff. And yet somehow I'm still here to talk about it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I agree.
You free
I
thinker,
agree.
you.
Look into anybody who's listening, look into the experiments they did around the Spanish flu, where they literally not only had sick people cough and sneeze and spit in people's faces. Literally, I'm not joking. They spit in people's faces. Then they took people, had them cough up mucus. They put it in a syringe and they injected it in these people, trying to get them sick from other people's germs, and they could not do it not one single time. They could not transfer germs from one person to another person, not one single time. So call us crazy, call us whatever you want, go look it up yourself, and then we'll have a conversation about it. That's all I want to say.
I'll let you in on one other little thing since you brought that up. In 2009, 2010, they tried. I mean, there was a legitimate threat. A legitimate threat of H1N1 bird flu.
Yes, I remember.
But you might recall that did not catch on at all.
No.
And everybody was basically noses up, who cares? In the third world nations, they were the same way. Oh, they tried to get the town councils to talk about it. And I looked at this study, but nobody took it seriously. Everybody thought it was a joke.
Yeah.
They even made fun of it on V for Vendetta.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
bollocks, she says. If you remember that scene.
I do.
I mean, that's just how far that got derailed.
Right.
But something changed. And
Yeah, what happened, man? All this, it was like they kept throwing virus after virus. It was like SARS and MERS and
nobody cared.
and no one cared.
The biggest change that you can look at, and if you look at the last ones that they tried, about 15 to 16, what changed with the technological component in terms of what everybody had access to after 2016?
Internet.
TikTok.
The number of people who owned smartphones, not flip phones, smartphones. The majority of the population across the land had smartphones after 2017. And you might recall that your smartphone was an essential tool to know if you'd been exposed to say dangerous situations and others who were exposed.
That's right.
Ignore your immune system. Look at your phone.
Yeah. Your smartphone told you where you could go to get checked to make sure that you were not being unsafe. If you follow me?
Yes.
And if you didn't have that smartphone, how could you have possibly known? I mean, yeah, you could watch the news, but that just took too freaking long. I mean, this was a race against every second. And if you wasted 1 second, I mean, you could die, and that would be really bad.
I'm looking.
And you wouldn't want that.
I'm looking in this
just stay glued to that phone.
And I see your name on the same page as our name. We're on the same page, bro. We got you. It's all nonsense.
Yeah, the contact tracing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Something else
I remember
I gotta tell
Sally.
you.
It was like Sally's sister's cousin talked to someone who might have had COVID, so now I have to go get a test and can't come to work for 2 weeks.
No test once.
Well, what that did was that hid the authoritarian element behind it, to where every single action for every individual was being controlled. And that's what everybody was completely asleep from for the first, year and a half of it. Nobody paid attention to that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm basically, if they tell me to get in the bus and go to this camp, I'm just going to do it.
So there's we're at 2 hours. There's one thing I want to ask you on camera, and then there's one thing I want to ask you after. So before we go to the rolling out, I want to ask you, what's your take on nukes? Do you believe that they're real, or do you believe that they're fake? I personally, I'll tell you, I believe that they're giant bombs, but I don't believe they're radioactive. I've seen I can't remember his name right now, but I can send you the video of the dude putting plutonium on his tongue, drinking water in it, swimming in the tank, saying, oh, it doesn't do anything. And I just think the videos they've showed us of nukes are complete nonsense. I don't know how they claim that the film and the cameras back then withstood a nuclear blast. You see buildings blowing up and you see a camera not moving at all. You see editing in the thing where a car appears out of nowhere. So I'm positive that what they have shown us is complete nonsense. But I'm not a nuclear physicist. I don't know. I'm curious what your take is on it.
Well, how about I not to be evasive and not answer your question, but why don't I explain it this way? The situation is very different than what we understand, and there's a way to prove this. There was a statistician that I taught with, probably about year 6 at the university, and he was a really good statistician. He was somebody who they said was going to go all the way to the top. He was going to be one of those people who would be remembered for generations to come. He was that good. He did an individual research paper and he was writing a book. And the book was concerning what were the odds that a nuclear war did not happen from 1949 to 1989.
Yeah.
And he spent probably about 6 weeks holed up in his house doing all these calculations. And he was hand jamming a lot of that. He wasn't trusting the computer. Well, apparently he submitted his findings to his department chair because he had to in order to get published through the university. And then that would have got him the wider publishing deal. I mean, this was all hooked up. This is going to be a big book. And the next day he was dismissed, fired without cause.
Wow.
And since all of his notes were hand jammed, apparently then there was this other issue that, and here's the thing, this was a guy, I mean, he was a really nice guy, but he was the classic total introvert. And I,
Right.
you know, I mean, today they'd probably call him involuntarily celibate. He was that kind of guy.
Yeah.
But then the story came up that he had this girlfriend and that he had committed acts of domestic violence against her. I mean, all this stuff came out.
Of course.
Wow.
And this guy, he was so awkward around, I'll just say it. He was so awkward around women. The story was so unbelievable. It wasn't even funny.
Yeah.
There's no way
He couldn't
woman would have
even
gone with him
like
for
talk
anything.
to them, much less hit a woman.
No,
Yeah, he got
would
smeared.
really get nervous, you know, around anybody.
Right.
And so, I mean, and not just women, but anybody.
Yeah.
He would get nervous. I mean, he was that much of an introvert, but he was a brilliant writer. And, you know, he had papers that were published, and that's how he was trying to approach this.
Yeah.
And I mean, nobody knows exactly what happened to him. And we didn't have email at that time, didn't keep in touch with him.
Yeah.
And nobody could find his notes because it was declared a crime scene.
Jesus.
And then the house was
wow.
the house was sold off, and then it was bulldozed down as part of a redevelopment plan that happened a couple years later.
I'm not
So
surprised.
nobody knew exactly what he was working on, and he wasn't one to talk to other people. So I can't say,
Yeah.
he confided in me, you know, what the actual formula was or what the stats were. But you could tell that he was working towards something that didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And if you just step back and think about it without doing any calculations, if the situation is as we understand it, where we had fail-safe and fail-deadly systems in place on both sides, intercontinental ballistic missiles that could reach either side from 6 to 20 minutes, depending on whether they're submarine or land-based missiles, then how in the heck did we ever get through that?
Yeah.
And if you look at the human equation in it, if you look at the classic military psychology, the fact that we are going to be attacked, we need to fire first.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what's indoctrinated in the military psychology.
Mm-hmm.
And you expect me to believe that adherence to the chain of command was more powerful than that.
Yeah.
We're told there were many mistakes made. There were many near misses, but every single time cooler heads prevailed. Really? And then the last element to that is, why did the government sponsor these nuclear terror films that kept coming out?
Yeah.
And I did a live stream talking about the early 80s when they had that triumvirate of nuclear terror films, The Day After, Threads, and then the lesser known one that was still powerful and effective, Testament.
Yeah.
All three of those films were designed to induce pure, raw fear and terror in people.
Yep.
And those weren't the first films like that. They had earlier films. If you go back and you watch The War Game from the 1960s, that was one of the first real terror films. You can even go back and say that Things to Come was also the first original terror film to inflict psychological fear in people about what war could lead to. So it's always been going on.
Wow, man.
So does it really even matter if they're real or not? Because if they were, someone probably should have used them.
Yeah, I think
If
it's
not a
just a fear
government.
tactic. I think that's what I think. I think it's something to put people in fear. Fear, as dumb as it sounds, is like when they put you in dis-ease, it puts your body in disease. You freaking fear hurts us. They want us all in fear. It's all about keeping us down, keeping us feeling stupid, keeping us from looking into things, all of that. That's how I feel. I mean, maybe I'm just a crazy conspiracy theorist that thinks I'm a time traveler on Twitter, but that's what I think. So
We don't say scare, we don't say fear. We say threaten them emotionally.
yes, I love it.
Yes.
Man, this has been so amazing. If you ever want to come back and talk about anything, I feel like we barely got into what you do, but that's kind of how this podcast is. Like, a lot of people bring people on a podcast and they ask them to just talk about their work. We're more about, like, we want to get to know you as a person. We want to see what you feel on other stuff, because we can go look up your work on YouTube. That's easy. Anybody can do that. And we'll post your link and people can go do that. That's awesome. But I want to know what you think on other things. And it's been amazing, man. Like, you are clearly an intelligent dude. And if you ever...
A lot of info. You can tell you put in a lot of work, man.
I got probably more out of this episode than
most.
Maybe any of the other episodes, or definitely most.
Yeah.
And mainly because, you know, the lesson that I think that should be learned from us talking to you is that we need to stay grounded, you know, and keep our heads in reality, or else you can just get lost in the mess of all the crap that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's the hardest part about it. I mean, and there are a lot of wonderful possibilities out there, but you know, and some people try to attack me for that. They say, well, you're being too much of a skeptic about it.
Yeah.
No, I'm open to the possibilities, but I need a little bit more before I just go diving in and thinking, A, B, and C could be true. Now, when I can go to a state capitol building, I can touch the walls, I can knock on it, I can see how incredible it is, I can physically interact with it. It's kind of hard to deny something like that.
Right.
It all goes up in that.
Know how unique it really is.
I agree.
No frickin' bricks in those dang columns either.
Exactly. So 2 things. 1, after we fade out, I want to ask you one question off the record. And 2, before we tell Death to fade it out and play the music, is there any message you want to give to people, that something that you think is the most important thing for people to look into, or just to feel, or whatever? Like, what do you want to tell people? What do you want people to get from this?
Do not be afraid to explore yourself, because it's in knowing yourself that's how you're going to restore the world. That's the basic theme behind my channel, and that's how I try to live my life. Now, if you decide there's something you prefer to pursue, just make sure it's your own decision. That's what I have to leave you with.
Awesome.
I love that. Death.
Awesome, dude.
Fade it out. So thank you so much, dude. This has been awesome.
Yes.
You have given us a lot of things to think about, and if you ever want to come back, you're obviously welcome. And if there's ever anything you want us to share, send it our way. We'll happily share it, man.
Yeah, man.
I appreciate that. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Lucius.
Yeah, thanks, dude.
Thanks, dude.